Hello everybody and welcome to my YouTube channel. This video is kind of like the first video in my Terraform series, so I hope the video brings or adds more value to your Terraform journey. As always, I would love to hear from you guys. So if there is something that you felt like I didn't touch or I did not include, please let me know. So use the comment section and just let me know what you think. And also, if you feel like there is something you would like me to cover or create content around, please do not hesitate. Like always, watch, like, share the video, and do not forget to subscribe for more great content just like this one. So, for the very first video in my Terraform series, I'll be starting off with like the introductory part of Terraform. So, pretty much, we're going to cover what is Terraform. We're also going to see how to set up our system or our computer to use Terraform to create resources. And talking about how to create resources or what cloud to use, we are going to be using AWS as our primary cloud provider. So I'll have to also set up my system to kind of like talk to my cloud account. So by installing the command line tool or utility for AWS and also set it that up to work correctly. So the other thing we'll be talking about, which I think is something that's very important when you start learning Terraform, or even if you're like a pro, it's something that can help you or make your journey or your process less painful. So it's understanding what blocks are in Terraform. And the last thing will be to kind of like talk about the Terraform project layout. So how to kind of like structure your Terraform project so it can be easily understood by someone who is just joining the project or maybe just joining the team. And as you know, it's very very important to kind of like mention what are some of the prereqs you have to like complete when you're taking the this watching this video or trying to get started with Terraform. And also this will kind of like help you to get ready for the next videos that are coming up in the series. So the very first thing will be to have like an AWS account. And also you should also make sure you create like a user, and that user you need to have the credentials or the access key and the secret key for that user. And just to kind of like make your work to be well organized, you can also use a text editor. For my own personal like preference, I love to use Visual Studio Code. And I will be using like very basic, I would say very basic Linux commands. So if you have some understanding of like Linux, it's also going to help you because I'll be using most of like my command line utility on my Mac. So knowing how to like navigate or to use Linux will be, I would say, a plus. It's not required, but it will be a plus. So let me start first with like what is Terraform, right? So Terraform is an open source infrastructure as code tool. It was developed by HashiCorp. So Terraform is very popular, right? So it's kind of like one of the de facto infrastructure provisioning tools for both cloud environments and on-prem environment. Again, Terraform helps the user to declaratively create, modify, and destroy infrastructure such as virtual machines, databases, load balancers, and some network components across multiple environments or cloud providers. So Terraform configuration can be version controlled. It means after putting together your Terraform configuration file, you can save them in a version control system. You can share your configuration file, and also you can reuse them. And also this allows teams to kind of like collaborate and work more easily and reduce like configuration drift. Talking about Terraform and how it manages to like to track state or how it treats or it deals with state. Terraform deals with state, I would say, in two ways. The first way is to kind of like put together like your desired state. So the desired state is reflected in your configuration file or in your main.tf file. And this is what you would like your infrastructure to look like. So you can call it your desired state. So it's current actually what is in the main.tf file. And also Terraform actually deals with state, which is like what is currently in the environment. So it saves that in Terraform state file. So the Terraform state file is just is being used by Terraform to know what is currently in your environment. That is what resources have been created and how are they configured. This makes it easier to like to make changes to the infrastructure without causing unintended side effects. So it knows exactly what is there, and if you wanted to make like some new changes, it knows exactly what to go change. In summary, I would say Terraform is an awesome tool that makes your infrastructure creation and management easier and highly scalable. So let's move on to the next step, which is like showing you guys how to kind of like install Terraform. So it depends on what system you're currently the system you're currently using. So if you're on a Mac, you can just run the command brew install Terraform. You should be able to install Terraform. If you're on a Windows or Windows PC, you can use just make sure you set up like a package manager like Shoko, for example. So with the command Shoko install Terraform, it can actually help install Terraform. If you're on like a Linux uh, distro like CentOS with Yum, you can also install Terraform. Or if you're on Ubuntu, you can install Terraform. So currently on my system, I do have Terraform installed. So let's just check it out. So I will just go ahead and type Terraform. I do currently have Terraform, so I'm good to go when it comes to that. So I'll just go back to. So the next thing after making sure you have Terraform or making sure you're done installing Terraform is to also make sure you set up your local system to be able to communicate or to talk to your AWS account. So in these we will try to like make sure one you install the AWS CLI command like the command line utility. Make sure you install that, and also having access to a user and the user credentials that you will use to like to configure your AWS CLI, because Terraform is going to also use those same credentials to like to authenticate when it's trying to like either make a change or create a resource in your cloud environment. So I'll go ahead and use. So I just before the video, I had to like to create a user, and these are my credentials. So I'm going to delete these credentials immediately I'm done with the video. So I don't mind showing you guys what it looks like, but it's just a way for me to show you guys how to get this going, or how to configure this. So first, since I'm on a Mac, I already ran the command brew install AWS CLI, so I can go back and just show you guys that I have my AWS CLI installed. So I'll just type AWS CLI, and you see with this message you can tell you can know that AWS CLI was successfully configured. So since it's successfully I successfully installed AWS CLI, I still have to do some extra step, which is moving forward to like to set up my local system to be able to talk to my cloud environment. So to do that, I will use the command AWS configure to pass in those credentials. So I will just go to my command line and I'll run the command AWS configure, and it will ask me for my access and secret key. But also it's going to ask me for my default region, and it will ask for my default output format. So let me just copy my access key. I'll come back here and I'll run the command AWS configure, which will help me to set up my AWS CLI. So it's asking me for my access key. I will just paste that. It will ask for my secret key. I'll come back to my text editor and just copy this, paste it. So it will ask for my default region. So for the default region, I'll just go with US East 1. For the default output, I'm not going to choose like an output format right now. I will just go with the default one, which is JSON. So I will just hit enter, and that is it. So you're done setting up your AWS CLI. So that was done correctly. So now everything is good. AWS is our local system is able to talk to our cloud environment. So I'm just done doing this step. So so once we're ready to go, right? So the next thing will be to kind of like jump into, I'm going to like just start talking about some things that I feel like are kind of like important, especially when you're getting started with Terraform. There's some other things that you need to know for you to like make your journey, I would say, as painless as possible. So to me, the very first thing you would want to know would be, or to understand, would be blocks in Terraform. So what are the different blocks? So in this case, blocks in Terraform are just like it's like a unit of configuration that represents a particular type of resource or data. So there are many different types of blocks, but I will just list few that I would say you will come across when you're starting off creating resources using Terraform. So the very first one I'll be talking about here will be the resource block. So I'll talk about the resource block. I'll talk about the provider block. I'll also talk about like module block and like the data block. So for the resource block, this is just kind of like a way for you to create a resource, because everything you're creating in your cloud environment at the end of the day will either be a resource or it will be like a data block, right? And they all follow the same pattern, but they have a different they have a different, I would say, keyword to place in front of it. So I will just open like a new window to just show you guys what it will look like. So when creating a resource, or when you're trying to create a resource, you first of all start by mentioning the resource keyword. And after the resource keyword, you put the type of, or the resource type, right? So the resource type in here. So you put the resource type, and after, still in double quotes, you have to give it a name. So usually I, just to kind of like keep things simple, I always call it the generic name, but actually it's a name that this resource is going to be known from within the root module. So let's say, for example, we want to just give it a name. Let's just call this name default for right now. So after you give it a generic name, or the name is going to be known within the root module, you you open your resource block. So your resource block starts where you see the curly braces, and it ends where you see the closing curly braces. So now everything that goes inside this resource block is called an argument. So for example, if you have to give this resource a name, for example, so you give it a name and you give it a name. So let's just call this resource one. So that is the name we want to call it. Then maybe you may want to give it a description. So we give it a description here. So this is what your resource block is going to look like. So it will start off by, you will start, but when trying to create like a resource, you have to use the keyword resource just to kind of like mention what kind of block you're using. So you start off with a keyword resource. After that, you need to mention the type, the resource type, like what are you trying to create. Then after that, you give it a name. Then this name is going to be used to refer to this resource within the root module. But if it's like an external, if you want to give it a name that will be recognized by like something that is outside of the root module, you will use a different argument in that case. You will use like tags to kind of like tag it. So yeah, but this is pretty much what a resource block would look like. So you start by the resource type, then you give it a name, you open your resource block, and everything that goes in between that is called an argument, and you close the resource when you're done putting everything together. So the second block we would like to look at will be the provider block. So in this case, I'll just go with provider. So with the provider block, same thing. You need to state what provider you're trying to use. Let's say in this case, I want to create my resources in AWS. So I will start by explicitly mentioning AWS as my provider. Then I'll open my provider block here using my curly braces. Then I'll also have to pass in some arguments. And these arguments can be things that are like pertaining to this specific provider. So an example can be something like the region you would like to create your resource in. So I'll just go with a generic region here. So I'll just say something like US is one. Then yeah, you can give that, just that's just like a sample of a provider, right? That's what a provider block will look like. But the good thing with this is you do not have to make things up, you do not have to memorize everything. The Terraform has a very very good documentation where you can actually go and get some of these arguments, or to see how these resource blocks are put together. They also have like a large amount of examples, right? Usage, how to create a specific resource, what some of the arguments are. And the good thing is some arguments are optional while others are required. And Terraform will kind of like they always put like next to the arguments, they will tell you if it's required or it's optional. So I'm going to show you guys kind of like a basic uh page where you can, get some of these resources and just use them the way you want. So you have to like, because not all resources are created the same way or equally. So you have to customize your resource to fit your own use case. So it's going to differ, but at the end of the day, they follow kind of like the same rules. So after that, so we have the module blocks, the data blocks. So I'm not going to kind of like go too deep into that because this is just like the introduction. So I will go deeper in like subsequent videos. So the other thing I would like us to talk about will be the Terraform project layout. So how can you structure your Terraform project such that if someone comes in at and like a later stage of your process, they can still enjoy it, or they can still kind of like fit into the project without too much struggles. So we are going to kind of like talk about some of the files you need to create, but most importantly, one thing that you should have in mind is the TF extension. So everything or every configuration file in Terraform ends with the .tf extension. This just tells your system or your text editor that you're using, it tells it what kind of configuration file, and it makes it to understand how to deal with it. So the very first one we'll be looking at will be the main.tf file. So the main.tf file is the actual file that contains your resources that you're trying to create. So technically, I would say this is you use this file to define your desired state, meaning what you're trying to create, the type of resources you're trying to create. You have to put them in here. So it can contain resource block, it can contain data blocks, it can also contain like the module block, and so on. The second file I feel like it's important as well is the provider.tf file. So the provider.tf file is going to contain every information pertaining or belonging to the provider you're trying to use. Some people want to kind of like create resources not just in a single cloud environment, so they may want to use multiple cloud providers or cloud environments. So the provider.tf file gives you that place where you can put these providers and kind of like use them appropriately. The other file that I think is very important is the variables variable.tf file. So the variable.tf file is a file that contains your variables. So this will come in handy, especially when you're trying to make your configuration or your project highly reusable. So instead of like hard coding most of your resources or your arguments, you may want to use variables. So you will save your variables in your variable.tf file. And also, not only variables, but at times you want to create a resource and there may be like an information that you would like to view without going to the console. You can also use your output.tf file to kind of like print out some of these vital information from the resource, because some of the resource or the information are not known until the resource is created. So once it's done creating, you may want to like print out certain things like the IP address or like a specific endpoint. So you can use the output.tf file to explicitly mention what you would like to be printed out after the code runs successfully. Also the module, like the module, so you can create modules. So instead of like creating like single resources, you may want to create resources as a whole. So you can use modules to achieve this, so you can have a directory just for modules. Also, another very important file is the backend.tf file, because usually people save their states locally, but when you save your state locally, it kind of like takes away your ability to like to collaborate with other people. So as a best practice, it's usually advisable to not save your state file locally. It's advisable to save it in a remote location where multiple people can kind of like have access to it, and also it encourages collaboration. So in the backend.tf file, you can use or state your backend source or your remote source, and this can be a remote as in like a cloud or like a storage bucket, or it depends on you which one you feel like will be most suitable for your specific use case. And this is kind of like just the introduction to Terraform. So it kind of like ends here, right? I mean, that was really fast, but I wish I could stay, but I don't want the video to be too long. So this is kind of like the conclusion of our very first video. But thank you very much for watching this video, and please do leave your comments, and do not forget to subscribe for more great content. And please let me know if you feel like there is something that is missing, or there is something that was not well understood, and I can help explain that in the comment section. So thank you very much, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.